So next is our Technology Spotlight 2. And our Technology Spotlight 2 is focused on energy security. And some of the questions that we're already getting into in the chat has to do with cyber vulnerability. And what are we doing about creating an attack-free kind of control system to help support our infrastructure? So with that, let me introduce the panel's moderator, Mr. Jay Kurowsky. Jay Kurowsky is the president and CEO of Aleta Technologies. Jay founded Aleta Technologies in 2011, and Aleta provides cyber support for both information and operational technology systems for the Department of Defense, numerous global corporations, and other companies. He has over 24 years experience in cyber and information security. In these roles, he has provided cybersecurity support for over 1,000 systems. That's pretty amazing. And he also advises the Pentagon on such cybersecurity issues as malicious content in commercial software and security accreditation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Grace. I'm having a bit of technical difficulties at the moment, getting the video started here, but hopefully everybody can hear me okay.
We can hear you.
Again, thank you, Grace. In the first panel, Mr. Kelly mentioned that if battery storage systems don't work properly, it could be a big explosive bomb. And I agree. In my 25 years of cyber experience, I found that a determined cyber adversary can do pretty much anything you can imagine. Imagine then a hacker affecting battery management systems to create numerous and widespread explosions at the click of a mouse. Many prior speakers talked about energy resilience as involving diversification of generation assets. I say it also must involve ability to operate diversified generation assets and transfer power in a cyber contested environment. For a week-long period in April of 2011, we here in Huntsville got a feel for what a cyber attack on the power grid could be like. We had trouble getting gasoline out of the ground into our cars, had trouble getting critical supplies, and had other serious challenges. And at first, we didn't know how long these problems would persist. In that case, the effects were caused by tornadoes that took out the electrical supply lines into the city. A large portion of the people who had gas in their cars fled the city and found safety and normalcy elsewhere since the energy problems were localized to the Huntsville area. In a cyber attack on the power grid, however, we might not have those options. Today's panel will delve into those issues. I'm really excited by the panelists we have today, and I'll introduce Mr. Hagley, Mr. Singer, Mr. Speaks, and Mr. Irish now. After I introduce them, they'll speak for a few minutes on their organization, and then we'll proceed into some panel questions. So first, I'll introduce Mr. Hagley. I'm going to introduce Mr. Darrell Hagley. Mr. Hagley's distinguished career includes military, federal, civilian, and commercial consulting experience. While assigned to the Office of the Principal Cyber Advisor to the Secretary of Defense, he advised on cyberspace activities, cyber mission forces, and offensive and defensive cyber operations and missions. His role encompasses overseeing strategic cybersecurity efforts to protect the control systems and operational technology, enabling the Department of Defense's critical infrastructure. He has been instrumental in setting law and policy within the government. Mr. Hagley, would you speak for a few minutes, please?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Looking forward to share with the folks a little bit about what, with regard to Department of Defense, been working for the last 10 years on this topic from a policy, personnel, assessments, everything from incident management, supply chain risk management, and working to try and get that whole department aligned on how we focus on control systems. As you know, the Department of Defense has over 500 installations and 250,000 buildings, another 200,000 linear structures, all that have devices that talk. And so it's a tremendous and fun challenge, and I'm humbled and grateful every day for all the folks who are trying to make all these systems more secure. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I'll introduce Mr. Bryan Singer. Mr. Singer began his career in the U.S. Military Intelligence Corps and then as a software systems developer in healthcare, telecommunications, and defense. In the late 90s, he made a pivot into industrial automation and an atypical leap from IT to OT. As an industry catalyst, he saw the need to better secure ICS systems in the early 2000s and worked to create the first industry standards for ICS, and then establish some of the first offerings in this space while at Rockwell Automation as the founder of Network and Security Services. Since that time, he has worked in many companies and has driven change with the industry. Bryan, will you speak, please?
Sure, and part of a little bit of the background noise, all of us in the COVID world, we have our distractions, so hopefully the dog will not bark too much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. Yes, I work as a principal. I work as a principal director with Accenture, and my primary role these days has actually been working in developing our OT incident response capabilities. I've been in the field for over 20 years, and one of the things I've had the luxury of watching is we theorized, we tested, we came up with future state looking attack strategies as to what an attack would look like against an OT environment. And I've been able to watch that pivot from when we actually started seeing the attacks occur and to really transition from what theory was to actual execution. And some of the things I've been focusing on heavily these days are realistic threats against operational technology environments. But more importantly, I really take it as a core mission. The question today came up a lot about resilience. That is a really near and dear to me because, especially in the field of OT, to me, the idea of resilience and cybersecurity is my job is not about hackers and crackers and stopping state actors of those things. My job is safe and efficient operations inside of a plant environment. And any weakness in the system is weakness in the system. And the things that we see out there that can go wrong can have any number of impacts. So I always take it as a real core mission within cybersecurity to not only look at how do we shore up and protect the environments, but how do we actually build robust, resilient, dynamic systems that are cost efficient, that at the end of the day produce energy more efficiently, make more steel, make better cars, do whatever it is that we do and do it better. I always like the adage of, why do we have brakes on a car? Most people would say to stop the car. Well, the real answer to that is if we never had a need to stop the car, we just keep going. But the answer is the brakes are for us to be able to go faster. And in cybersecurity, I take it very much as that same idea that the better controls that we have in place, the more resilient those controls that we have, the better we're able to run our plants in the modern environment.
Thank you. Our third panelist is Mr. Chuck Speaks. Mr. Speaks currently serves as the Vice President of Economic Development and sits on the Executive Committee of the Board of Directors for Cyber Huntsville, a nonprofit dedicated to expanding the education, economics, and labor force of cybersecurity in the Tennessee Valley. Cyber Huntsville is a sister organization to Energy Huntsville, who's hosting this event today. Mr. Speaks is a leading strategist, architect, and operator in the field of next-generation technology infrastructure, solutions, and cybersecurity. He currently leads programs, business development, and strategy for cybersecurity and technology solutions at Intuitive Research and Technology Corporation, a premier technical and professional engineering firm in Huntsville, Alabama. Chuck, will you speak, please?
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys. As Jay noted, Cyber Huntsville is a sister organization to Energy Huntsville, one of Mayor Battle's initiatives within the city and the region. I describe Cyber Huntsville as sitting at essentially the crossroads of cyber capabilities and cyber requirements. We spend a lot of our time, our focus, our energy on promoting cybersecurity understanding within our community, both from a personal level as well as business operations, but also promoting it as an economic engine, as well as trying to grow our cyber workforce. So we spend a lot of time doing education, all the way from K through 12. You see a lot of our work is showing up as helping launch the Alabama School for Cyber Technology and Engineering. That's breaking ground outside my window right now. So it's a pretty exciting time for that. But also doing things such as putting on the National Cyber Summit, U.S. Cyber Camp at Space Camp. All the work we do with Cyber Patriot in our schools, as well as driving more cyber work, both commercial and government, to our region. So we have a lot of folks that donate a lot of their time to the organization, and we're a lot of really dedicated folks wanting to expand both our region's posture from a cyber perspective, but also grow that next generation of cyber talent here in the Tennessee Valley. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Jeff. Our third panelist is Mr. Brad Irish. Mr. Irish serves as the Manager of Information Technology and the Cybersecurity Subject Matter Expert for the Alabama School of Cyber Technology and Engineering that Chuck mentioned. How many of you knew that we had such an amazing school in Huntsville? Mr. Irish is a certified teacher and taught information technology and engineering in public and private schools from 1996 to 2006, with breaks after 2001 for military deployments. Mr. Irish served as an information system security officer for the Missile Defense Agency and the U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command from September 2014 to April 2020. And as I mentioned, he also has a distinguished prior military career. Brad, would you speak, please?
Yes, sir. So thank you to Energy Huntsville for the opportunity to speak with you all today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the exciting opportunity that we have with the Alabama School of Cyber Technology and Engineering with regard to the energy sector and operational technology. So ASCTE was founded, just a little background for you guys, in April of 2018. The tech and engineering sectors in Alabama identified an obvious shortfall in the workforce, that it can join skill sets in both engineering and cyber technology and security. The structure of the school is that of a state university rather than a typical K-12 system. This gives us much greater flexibility in terms of the curriculum offerings, our scheduling, our partnering relationships with industry, other things that we have access to. It also allows us to be a residential program, which we are, so we can draw from the whole of Alabama rather than just the local northern Alabama population. So recently, one of our students who has shown an interest in OT and I sat on a panel with the Idaho National Labs to discuss cybersecurity education impacting economic and workforce development. We spoke largely on the role of ASCTE and focusing on energy-related OT and the IoT that are used in the energy sector. It was clear that during the workshop that the DOE, the industrial cybersecurity industry, and the oil and gas sector and the hydronuclear power sectors have increasing workforce needs of individuals capable of marrying both cyber and technology, cyber security and technology with OT and IoT in those sectors. So we're really excited here at ASCTE to be here and able to partner with and do some learning and growing with the energy sector. And we're hoping that we can have some, create some partnerships through Energy Huntsville, because we do internships with all of our students. By the time our kids will come out of this institution, they'll have some certifications related to project management, CAD, a couple of cyber security and networking offerings, and they'll also have a capstone project and at least a year's worth of work experience. So to get that year's worth of work experience, obviously we like to filter them into some internships and work closely with those entities to make sure that they're doing the right thing and hopefully placing them after graduation. So the goal is to get workforce ready individuals post high school graduation and not all the way wait until they're all the way through college.
Great. I've got some, thank you, Brad. I have some questions for you all, for my panelists, and I'll just let you jump in as you care to. First question is, what are the current challenges in responding to incidents in energy systems? And specifically, what are the key challenges for small and large utility service providers?
I think I'll take that one first, it sounds like. So yes, actually, that's one of the things. I've probably responded to close to about 200 incidents at this point. That's something I've been focusing on quite a bit the last several years. And in that, I have a background in response and forensics, but I've worked with a number of teams on the IT side. And as we apply those techniques over into the OT, otherwise known as the industrial side, we start to find out that there's some shortfalls. OT and responding to OT cyber incidents is going to be a lot more focused upon behavior of the system and understanding what is nominal, what's normal behavior of the system, and looking for anomalies in the industrial protocols, how they communicate, how the system is operating. And if it's a cyber physical impact we're worried about, we actually need to look at the physical systems. So we had a couple of cases where we started getting involved in an incident response, and I'll actually bring up a case from this year where a industrial materials company in North America, that's about the extent I can go into it, suffered a ransomware hit. In fact, one of the things I hear people say a lot is, it's just all ransomware, it's not a big deal. I can tell you firsthand that there are there's different types of ransomware attacks, and a lot of them are anything but simple, and this is a good example. Where we had automated tools were used to actually gain access to a number of the plant environments. And then the automated tools, it looked like pretty simple attacks. In fact, they were pretty well ignored. Well, that wasn't the rest of the story. Hands-on keys attackers actually took over, and it looked very much like they intentionally went after some of the OT systems. In fact, I'm pretty convinced of it based upon how they scanned them. They made it onto engineering workstations and other HMIs and lab systems. And if you know industrial settings, that's where industrial systems, that's where all the logic, all the safety, all the things all the code that runs an industrial process, that's where those things sit. And then to add insult to injury, on the way out the door, they banged the gong by deploying ransomware, effectively rendering any means of trying to reverse engineer or figure out what the attackers might have done useless. Okay, so when the plant went down, they had a challenge on their hands, which is, wait a minute, what could the attacker have done with that access, right? And your traditional IR techniques, incident response techniques, are going to look at removing the threat, containing the threat, taking the IOCs, finding the IOCs, indicators of compromise, and removing them from the system. And our IR teams, that's the way they focused on it. I'm like, but that's not where we can't stop there. We have to understand that banging the gong and deploying ransomware on the way out, that very well could have done data hiding and could have done, the attackers could have hidden the tracks to what they've actually done. They could have changed process logic. They could have set Trojan horses inside the code. They could have set up unsafe conditions. And we had to help the customer through how do they safely return to service in their physical systems when we believe that it's possible those physical systems have been compromised. So we had a number of cases like that where, again, we're having to adopt a lot of our incident response practices to what the threat may actually be in an OT environment, and then calibrating our approaches as such. So again, we can't just rely upon some of the techniques we have there. We have to understand if we're worried about cyber physical impacts, we have to apply cyber physical behavior analytics to the system as well.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else to add? That was great information.
Yeah, Jay, I'll add a little bit to that. It's Chuck. So, you clearly set it out that the issue is the physical cyber convergence, right? So, a lot of the things that we're doing these days are automated, and therefore they're connected. They're connected when we don't even know they're connected, or in different ways. Your question mentioned what's preventing, or what are the unique challenges to some of these small, local, mid-sized, even larger-sized utilities to combat this problem. And the problem isn't just ransomware. That is just a symptom, right? Intelligence reports tell us that there are 3 distinct types of attackers that are showing up in utility systems. You know, you've got your folks who are just looking to make some noise. You got some folks that are actual criminals looking for personally identifiable information. There's a vast amount of employee and customer data in these types of systems, on the IT or enterprise side. And then you have your advanced persistent threats that are typically nation state. And ransomware, just like you said, may just be setting fire to the house on the way out the door, right? if we don't have eyes on, if we're not tracking for a good length of time, we're not understanding what the actors were in there for how long, what were they getting into, how pervasive was the attack, was it just a reconnaissance mission, or did we lay something back for coming back later on? So an approach like this is pretty robust, right? So large enterprise IT or Fortune 500s have a hard time doing this type of stuff. And it all comes down to the availability of resources. Those resources are, one, funds to actually do this, because this requires skilled cyber operators. It requires some unique tools to get it done. And even if you have the funds to do this, in a lot of instances, in a lot of geographies, it's almost impossible to hire them. We find this challenge in Huntsville, right? So there's several of us on this call right now, they're on this video, in fact, where we're competing against the same cyber talent every day, right? It's the same people that we're competing against. That's why these initiatives like the Cyber School, Cyber Huntsville, Cyber Patriot, where we're trying to grow more people to do this type of work, is so very important, because those lack of resources, both from a funding perspective as well as the actual talent to do it, are so critical, because we have so very connected IT and OT convergence.
Yeah, it's just so one of the interesting things I've heard from some of the people who are in energy management, facility management, and building operators, as much as they would like to be part of this process, if the contract, says that a vendor has to take care of this, then that takes it out of their hands. So it was kind of an interesting perspective I wasn't totally aware of, but there are some who are hands-on and are monitoring those alerts and can actively do it. But there are some that if it's in the contract, the vendor has to do it, then there needs to be some sort of agreement that the customer knows what's going on. So that's just another challenge to that area.
Thank you. Bryan, did you want to follow up?
Yes, actually, and some really good comments, and it reminded me to bring up one of the things I've been hearing more and more, even at some big security conferences, are a number of folks saying, well, we think we may be overstating the threat actors' capability, especially when they start talking about OT environments. And that's because a lot of folks are looking at fairly simple attacks out there against they're looking at fairly simple, fairly immature attacks a lot of times. And one thing I'd like to bring up is, having again been responded to a number of different incidents. There was a large geopolitical event that happened earlier this year that got folks around the world pretty upset. And I got called by a contact of mine to come in and help out. He goes, look, we know, we've seen the attacker. We know what they're doing. They're going after a port. He's like, can you please help us make sense of what they're doing based upon these attacks? And you look at it, and they were all very simple attacks. They were just stuff right out of Metasploit, right out of Cobalt, nothing really that remarkable. But it wasn't what they were doing that was interesting. It was who they were attacking. It was what they were looking for. And they were going to this port. They were finding the investors in the port, the financial backers, the customers, the suppliers. They were starting to move out from there into what was really an overall supply chain attack, which is the kind of things we're starting to look at more. And based upon that, it's like, look, it's not how they're attacking, it's what they're attacking that's the interesting story. And we're able to put a picture together based upon that. I said, well, hey, here's what you probably need to start looking at next. And we even went down to looking for Windows event IDs that could be associated with certain types of like lateral movement, things like that within the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And we started plugging those into our collectors. And it was only a matter of hours later that we started to see attackers come in far more skilled at that point, that we're doing things on a directed level towards the industrial environment. So I really like to make sure I highlight, especially for energy sector, that we don't immediately start to dismiss. You really need to learn to ask that next question, because we are seeing threat actors with quite a bit of capability. They're not there scanning. They're the ones coming in a little bit later.
Thank you. Next question. What training is available for building an energy system operators to train them in what they should do in a cyber contested environment?
So Jay, I can talk to that at the level that we are at here at ASCTE. So we have taken industry experts and hired them as teachers here. So we have in engineering and physics folks who are here and are, one of the units is very directly related to energy technology, who is talking to the kids and enlisting them to do hands-on projects where one group of students, blue teams, and one group of student red teams. So they're really getting some hand-on experience with regard to being both the black hat and the white hat. And that's not just in the IT realm, that's also in the OT realm. So I think that that hands-on experience is very valuable and probably would be even at higher levels.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I think one thing, again, when we're dealing with industrial systems, the engineers are the ones that understand those, the ones that design them a lot of times. When we deal with cybersecurity threats, that's long held the tradition more of the IT side. So we've always had this kind of challenge of the IT-OT convergence between the engineering and the IT realm. I'm an IT person that learned engineering, but that's not a normal jump. I will say, having developed a lot of folks over the years, I've had better luck taking engineering folks that have things like embedded system design or some type of code background and getting them educated about how to analyze network traffic and things like that to get events. I've had a better time translating people or transitioning people from more of an engineering role to an IT role for OT cybersecurity. Takes a little bit longer for the IT side because we have to teach them not only, the IT skills tend to be very, very strong. In fact, a lot stronger a lot of times because they understand network protocols. But getting them to be able to connect the dots to physical event occurring is a little more of a challenge. But one thing I always recommend with organizations is to start cross-training between those two different sides to get folks really starting to communicate a lot more so that when things actually occur, they're not just yelling at each other and they're actually going, okay, let's talk. How do we filter the noise out from what's actually going on?
Yeah, and I'll also.
Okay, Chuck.
So I'll agree with what Bryan was just saying. From all right, so my corporate perspective, we have a lot more luck taking engineers and training them who do embedded systems and training them up on cyber rhythms and vice versa. So agree with that. I will say from a coming along perspective, the Cyber Huntsville initiatives around Cyber Patriot, the things that we're doing, the cyber camp at Space Camp, those are great ways to introduce the next generation. We talk about training. We always tend to think about those folks who are in industry right now who need cross-train. Those are the folks that we need them right now, but we need to do a better job of farming those that next generation, and is to get folks interested. I always prefer to hire somebody that doesn't just, they don't just do cyber, right? I didn't go out, and that's not to say anything about a cyber degree, those are great. But if you know this, if you know you know IT, if you know code, if you know how to tear a system down, and then you move up a level from that, it gets really, you're more in depth, I guess, from your knowledge perspective. So that build up that takes sometimes years to get to is very beneficial, and those people tend to perform really highly. So I totally agree with what our reps from the school and what Bryan just said. Over.
Great, thanks, Chuck. Daryl?
Yeah, so this has been a challenge for the government to try and figure out what are the specific roles of the people who are going to be managing energy systems, the facilities, and the buildings. Sure, if you're going to be one of the dedicated cyber experts, there's some formal training from SANS and a couple other programs. And it's great to hear what's going on in Huntsville to integrate it all the way into the STEAM programs and Cyber Patriot. But I've seen a lot of those programs that are not as advanced and have not included infrastructure. So I think, those are some tremendous opportunities there. Colleges, their engineering program, what's the right level of cybersecurity that they should be exposing their folks to. And then from the people who are getting computer science degrees, what's the right engineering level course that they should be taking. So there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a couple websites that we can forward and relay if people have some questions on what type and where training. DHS has a number of different offerings, but there's still a lot of opportunity to get a little bit more focused on what each of the roles of those people are and what is the right training for them.
All right, let's move to the next question. How has COVID changed the threat landscape?
Jay, I can take a real quick swing at that at first if you want to get it started. So from a distributed workforce perspective, so everybody is working from a different location. It's not just work from home, but work from anywhere. So the threat landscape, the attack surface, if you will, is much more broad. When working almost exclusively from an office, there's a physical point of presence, right, that has a concentrated effort for attackers to go after. When my workforce is spread out, then everybody's laptops are distributed. VPNs may or may not be working. I might be working from Starbucks or the beach this week. Doesn't really matter. But my attack surface is much broader, and files, sometimes private information is crossing the wire, maybe where it shouldn't be. So COVID has it's changed the way we work. For sure, there's a lot of learning going on right now. But in the interim, it provides a ripe opportunity for adversaries to pick on us a little bit.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, I think that's definitely over the last few months, again, within the practice that I support in the incident response, also some of the threat intelligence, we've noticed a very broad uptick in, think about when the EP3 plane crashed in Taiwan and all your base are belong to us, and think about some of those other things that have happened around the world, and these cyber attackers love to jump on that. And we've seen a definite uptick in people deploying COVID-related malware or COVID-related attack links or false information out there that led people into bad websites. I've seen quite a few of those. The other thing we've certainly noticed has been, in the comment about the distributed workforce, when you lose control of those physical assets, you never really know who's actually on the other end. And maybe somebody loaded a program on their dad's computer or put in a thumb drive, and there's a lot of different threat vectors. So we've seen that the insider threat, but kind of an undetermined insider threat has started to spike a little bit, that it's a little more difficult for us to figure out who's in the system and the things that are going on, especially with a lot of the layoffs that have happened and things like that. That's always companies in distress, companies that are under economic pressure. That's a good way that's one of the first things I always watch for when I'm really trying to figure out whether or not a cyber attacker is actually going after an organization. What are the problems within the company? So we've seen a lot of those. But we've also seen just a broad uptick in the automated scanning, the decoupling of the information gathering process and the attack process, which we've been working on for a while. Huge amounts of broad automated scanning using attack techniques, going onto Shodan, going onto a variety of different websites, finding lots and lots and lots of computers that are vulnerable, but then actual hands-on keys attackers taking over. And to the energy sectors and industrial systems, this is particularly relevant because a lot of times our plants and our businesses, they tend to be really similar at their level of maturity, their patch levels, things like that. So when an attacker finds one vulnerability, it is very common that we see that vulnerability may exist in lots of places. That happened with in the automotive sector earlier this year. Had a really big impact at Honda that's pretty well known. There was a huge impact across a lot of mining in Australia, very much the same type of issue out there where common mode vulnerabilities had a huge impact across a lot of plants. So that clustering has become a lot more prevalent the last few months. But I will say that one thing is, I've always gone with the theory that I have to go on site in industrial settings in order to do our job. The COVID impact has not been all bad. One thing, because we've been forced to work in a more disconnected environment, one thing I've noticed is that I have to rely on my customers a lot more to provide good data. So I have to do a better job of communicating what I need. I have to talk to them a lot more. So a lot of our projects that I've done over the last few months, I've noticed we've actually had a lot better level of client interaction. The clients have had a lot more opportunity for buy-in in what we're working on. We've had much more effective discussions, got a lot better information about what their skills and capabilities really are like. So, rather than what I've noticed is that not only have we seen some of these bad impacts, we've actually seen that a lot of our opportunities to interface with our clients have actually, those relationships have improved. I'm getting better information and doing a better job with our clients because we're getting a more meaningful participation out of them. So kind of good news, bad news, but I definitely don't see it as being all bad.
Great. Any other comments on that one? Go ahead, Brad. We haven't heard from you much.
Now, just quickly, what?
All right, never mind. Go ahead, Daryl. Really?
All right, just quickly, what this has done is really, focused us on what are secure options for, this remote connectivity. It was kind of rare, and then not many people did. We really didn't focus on those secure options. Now we really are, and we've really meaningful and good research, and are now deploying more secure tools, changing our policies on how to be more secure. And so that's been, as just mentioned, one positive upside of this. And also from an adversarial perspective, we're kind of having a little bit more of an opportunity to watch what they're doing in some of these areas.
Thank you. Brad?
Yeah, so I was going to tag along with what Bryan was saying about the increased amount of scanning that is going on. We have one student that did, so obviously we've got a bunch of tech students here. A lot of them are very tech oriented. So one had done a study of the activity that had gone on in his home networks router, and found that over the period of the COVID, since COVID in March, there's a large uptick in activity attempting to get into the home router system. So we did a little bit of studying about that, and that seems to actually be an undercurrent in that a lot of the home systems are getting not necessarily hit, but probed a little more frequently than they would normally, because the workforce is there.
Interesting. All right, we have about 5 minutes left to this panel, and we have a question that came in over the chat box. It says, other than training engineers in IT, how do the cyber knowledgeable educate business background folks so that they understand the need to invest and it's more than just a virus scanner? So how do we educate the leadership on need to invest in cybersecurity for OT systems?
Focus on the business. Okay. So if you're a cyber person or a technology person that is quote trying to sell the need to the business side, it's focused on business impact. Everything. A lot of us on this call are technical, former technical, whatever it is. So we have to kind of overcome this, but put it in a business context. From a security risk, right? What is the risk to the business? What are the downstream impacts? Can you map it to the financial? So keep banging away at it. My only comment to that. But when you're approaching your business leaders as a cyber practitioner, as a technology practitioner, is put in their language. Is try to map it to business impact.
Yeah, I think especially for the industrial side, a big challenge is getting that IT/OT boundary, getting that worked out. And I will not understate that it's a pretty significant challenge. I'll give an example of a penetration test I was doing a few years ago, where it was a kind of a capture the flags. A lot of us had different activities, and what I was trying to do with my team was to initiate a partial stroke test to actually open a valve when there's a safety system and a controller in place. Right. Well, it only took us a short amount of time to figure out the command structure. We were sending the command correctly. We sent it hundreds of times. The thing was, and that was lighting up the network security monitoring and the IT. They started calling foul. Hey, look, guys, there's an attack. There's an attack. Right. Well, the engineers walked over to the system and looked at it, and guess what? The valve never moved. Right. So after a few minutes, they just discounted it as a false trail and a false positive. Well, we weren't done, and later that afternoon, we figured out that we were not computing a dual-layer checksum in the packet correctly. And when we figured that out and we corrected it, guess what? Next time we launched the command, the valve opened. However, because they had already flagged it as a false, they had already flagged it as a false positive, they weren't looking, and we got to score the point on that one because they never noticed the valve actually opened. So that kind of highlights that difficulty between engineering and the IT mindset. And we're seeing this a lot now in the network security monitoring market with like tools like CyberX and Nozomi, Clarity, Forescout, Fortinet. Those are incredibly capable tools, and they do a really amazing job of detecting traffic on the wire. But they cannot convert that traffic on the wire to knowing that something physically occurred. And so where I spend a lot of time right now with companies is to work between that boundary to get the OT people and the IT people talking a lot more so that they don't just discount things as false positives. They take it more seriously and they understand what a realistic attack path is into the system so that, again, so that we don't have those, they label those false flag, but then we actually succeed later on.
All right, we've got just a few more minutes. One more speaker want to comment on this question? All right.
In terms of trying to get leadership to know whether they should be investing in these tools, especially when a lot of them are already in a risk avoidance mindset. They want to minimize, their exposure. A simple tabletop exercise with if there's an assumed breach, what happens to your intellectual property? What do you have to do? Who would be responsible for doing what? It really has been very eye-opening. And then, initiating that next action to, well, how real of a possibility is this?
Thank you. With that, let's wrap up. Thank you for everybody that was listening, and special thanks to all four of our panel members. Wish you all the best of success in your career, not only for your own sakes, but because our country needs you. So thank you very much.